Okay, folks, we're going to go ahead and begin here and say good morning to everybody who is joining us locally and across the country, perhaps some internationally. It's great to have all of you here again for our July virtual open house. This is the fourth one of these that we have done. And we got some pretty good feedback from folks and some guidance about what they'd like to see. So you'll see that reflected in the program that we have for you today. We got some really cool things and some detailed work and some techniques and ideas you'll be able to apply to your own modeling. So it should be a lot of takeaways from today. By the way, you notice as we go through, we do want to be able to answer your questions. And so there is that Q&A portion that you see on your screen. So as we go along and you see various presentations and things that we're talking about, if you have a question, just put it in that Q&A panel, and we'll get to it either in progress or certainly at the end of the meeting. And Keith, I'm going to ask you to kind of keep an eye on that for us. I don't exactly see all the things in that Q&A tab when I'm running the program from my computer. So if there are questions that are popping up that I don't see, make sure you jump in when we have some breaks in the program, and we'll be able to answer those for folks. So where are we headed today? As always, we're going to begin with a pictorial overview of the center and the displays for those of you that have not been here before. I know many of you have been here before. And so we've rearranged the show a little bit, and you'll see some new pictures, and we'll talk a little bit about how we did it and some of the detail on that overview of the center. Also, we got feedback from a number of you saying we'd love to have a little bit more in-depth work on some of these how-to clinics so we can make sure that we can put this into practice. So we're going to do that today. That second segment is an in-depth clinic on a weathering rolling stock. It's actually based on a video that we shot at this point. I guess it was in 2007, but all those techniques we're still using today to weather locomotives and rolling stock. And so Keith Wolf from our group put together the video, did all the editing, and everything you need to know about how we weather the rolling stock at the center is right on that video. And we'll have a discussion with that as well afterwards. And then we all know that having backdrops makes a huge difference in your displays. And how good they look. And so there are two different ways to do backdrops, probably more than two ways, but a lot of them today are printed backdrops on various types of backgrounds, some self-adhesive vinyl or plastic materials. We have some of those up at the center, but also a lot of people hand paint their backdrops. And so John Addison is doing that now. He is redoing the backdrops on the Silverton Central, the S-scale layout that we have there. And we have a short video segment on that, and he's here live also to explain some of the techniques he used with acrylic paints to get that done. And of course, we'll have the Q&A. That's where you use the chat feature. If you've not been to the center, this is what it looks like from the outside. This is a picture of our building. We're in Odessa, just off of Success Drive, off of State Route 54. And so we hope that you'll be able to visit us at some point. Another shot from the outside. We've got about 7,500 square feet of our various displays inside the building. So as you know, if you've been here before, basically our open houses are pretty crowded. So the last one we had was, I guess it was in March, right? Maybe it was February, the last one that we had. Because of the social distancing issues, it's tough to do the live open houses. Got our fingers crossed, hoping that we'll be able to open again in September. Here you can see people, we do clinics, we have a modeler stage and a bunch of people here watching one of our clinics that we're doing. And you get a view down through this is the center, the right side of the display area. On the left is the Sundance Central, and that is the layout we're going to start with here, a description of the Sundance Central. Basically, the Sundance Central started working on this about 15 years ago. Truly, it's a modular layout. We build it in modules. It's traveled the country from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon, from Los Angeles to St. Louis. It's quite a deal moving it, but it's built as modular. It is the centerpiece of the Suncoast Center for Finescale Modeling. It's 1 to 20.3, which means it's FN3 scale. And so it's large scale. And a group of us wanted to build something in fine scale, in large scale, 1 to 20.3. So this is how the Sundance Central came about. You can see here's a shot from the other side. This is Charlie Belcher from Channel 13, the Fox affiliate here in Tampa. Every November he comes and does the morning show. And so this is before he went live, probably at about 6:45 in the morning. But you can get a sense for what it looks like from that side of the layout. And so we have various displays. This happens to be a shot in the yard of locomotive, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we work with these displays. Most everything here is scratch built. All the track is hand laid. We do all of our own foliage and trees, and so you'll get some sense for how it's put together. Dave, we're going to have you turn your audio back on. Here we have a shot inside of the engine house. This is a scratch build model that Dave did. I don't know, how big is this thing, Dave?
This is probably about, I want to say, 40 inches by 40 inches, that area.
Yeah, to give you some sense of perspective, you can see a human looking through the end there. You see in the picture, person with glasses.
People's heads out of it is pretty tough to do. They like to get in there. It's loaded with detail. It's just stacked with detail, so you kind of have to look deep to see it all.
Yeah. And it has its own, since this is a modular layout, it has its own module, right? That we essentially, and its own case for transporting this.
Yeah, a lot of things on the layout come off and they're actually put in special storage places for transport, but this actually goes as one big piece. It has its own separate container for it because taking it apart would be almost impossible to put it back together again at a show or whatever.
So here's another building that Dave built. This is the sawmill. Again, the footprint on this is probably almost as big, isn't it?
Well, actually, this is what you would call a flat, only meaning that it only has a portion of the actual building because of the size. If it was the size, it would probably end up being 12 foot by 12 foot. But in reality, this flat itself is 8 feet across. So it's a very large sawmill.
Yeah, so a question we get pretty often, Dave, is how did you do that water? There's periods of water is squirting on those logs under pressure. So how'd you do that?
Well, first of all, when a log comes out of a log pond, it's been floating there for a while. It's got a lot of debris on it, not good for saw blades. So they wash them as they come through and go up into so that they get a lot of debris off. So depicting that I saw a photo and I said, that'd be a good one. And that's all done with invisible thread, and I used it was a clear acrylic caulk to create the water effect. The method, I think we'll probably do it. We've done clinics on how to do it before. We might do another one to show how it's actually done.
And what about the spray, the stuff that's splashing on the surface of the log?
That's a combination of the acrylic and some polyfill fibers.
Yeah. Okay. All right, good. Yeah, so that's good. Now, Richard, we're going to ask you to turn your audio on because as we continue our tour of the Sundance Central, this is one of the 2 hand-built trestles that we have. This is actually a photograph taken by Greg Kilmar. Some of you know Greg, he does terrific work. So Richard, tell us a little about the trestle. I know this comes apart when we transport it as well.
Yes, it does. Basically, this is the radius trestle, and at the other end of the layout is an S trestle that Frank and I both built both the trestles. Frank actually did a template for all the bents when we built them. Not like going to a hobby shop and getting the wood. We actually go to Home Depot, cut all the wood for it because of the size of everything. And then each bent really comes off the layout when we transport it. Then we weather it. And when we get to a show, we put it back together. The top trestle section is done in 3 sections. We cut out, again, a template. I think we used an MDF board to do the road bed and the track on top of that.
Yeah, so this is good. By the way, those of you looking at that wall of rocks behind, you can imagine how heavy that would be if they were plaster. But
Yeah,
they're all foam rocks.
Yeah, basically they're all foam rubber rocks. Because
Yep.
when I got into this thing, knowing that we're going to be traveling with it and putting this thing together, I looked into a lot of things, and using plaster or any of those kind of materials, this thing would weigh a ton. And I saw a video online, I think it was in Australia, talking about using foam rubber to produce rocks. And that's what that whole back area is done with, foam rubber. And it has tile output on it, and then the coloring is added to it. Then vegetation is put onto it.
Yeah, the method works well. We'll probably make that one of our future clinics, I would think, as well. Okay, so let's keep moving here. Speaking of Greg Komar, he's obviously an accomplished photographer. He shot this in our yard. He actually added the background there. And so there's a picture of that he put together, uses like a three-dimensional layering approach. So it's a beautiful piece of work there. It's another one he shot. This happens to be on the Muskrat Ramble. And this is one of the layouts that we have. It's ON3, and it was built by a group of Australian modelers. And so it's another picture. You see simulated daylight effect there really nicely. We're going to be spending some time at the end of our program today with John Addison on the Silverton Central. He's going to be talking about the backdrop. So this is a shot from the Silverton Central here at this point. That's our S-scale layout that John has built. And then we have a number of military models. Dave, we're going to run through these relatively quickly, but you can give us a commentary on each one of these, just a couple of headlines.
Yeah, this particular one you see is it's World War II scene. It's a medical tent and a field hospital, I should say. And it was built in Italy by Luca Montevesi, goes by the name of Vetus 64. And he's one of the best 1/6 scale modelers in the world. So the next several you're going to see are a lot of his work. This was a collaboration of three people, myself, a gentleman who lives in Pennsylvania, and Luca Montevesi. Luca did the figures. John and I did the tank. I did the detailing. He built the actual M10 tank destroyer, what you say. So this was another collaboration between Frank Palmer and myself. Frank did the railroad car. Beautiful job he did on that after some work. And then the figures were done by Luca once again, and I did a lot of the diorama work. There's some 3D printing in here. There's some laser cutting in here. There's a lot of hand work done by Frank on this beautiful boxcar.
Yeah, this is 1/6 scale. What's the actual length? About 5 feet?
Yeah, this thing, no, it's not quite 5 feet. I think it's more like 4 feet long.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, I haven't seen it. It's pretty imposing.
Big stuff.
Okay. We also have added the O-scale switching layout. It's an operating layout, and this is one that's interactive. People can operate this. I don't know if Joe's with us he signed up for the webinar. He was with us this morning. You see Joe there actually helping out, but we put the throttle in the hands of the guests, tell them what moves to make. So you got a two-man crew, you got an engineer. That's the guest that runs the locomotive, and then you got somebody acting as the conductor or brakeman, tells them what moves to make, turns the turnouts, switches, and does the uncoupling. It's been really popular. It's got a lot of detail. We scratch built a number of buildings for this as well. You see the Westinghouse 7-story building here, built out of DPM panels and with a complete supporting system underneath. And we tried to add a lot of detail to it. This actually happens to be a Shapeways 3D printed dumpster that I painted up and added some details, some trash, and some signage. And of course, everything is weathered and detailed to look like prototype. These are all done from prototype photographs. Here's another. This is on the O scale. This is one that Dave built on the scrap company that we have there. But you can see again, it's the detail that really brings it out. And then here's another picture from the O scale. I don't know if we have Frank live on this or not on this call because he had some trouble signing in. Are you there, Frank? Yeah, it doesn't sound like. So,
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
It just takes me a while to get up and get to my little phone to turn it on. It's not as easy as sitting at a laptop. But this is a model that Dave purchased. It's I forgot the name of the company now, but it was supposed to be for remote control out in the pond somewhere. But since we weren't going to do that, I just cut the bottom off and painted it up and added a ton of details to it, and we use it for our railroad barge.
Yeah, so Frank, one of the questions we get often is how do you make those rust spots? That's really a two-step process, right? As you see there on the stack.
Yeah, first of all, you use like a burnt sienna colored paint to put the rust spot on, and then you use a transparent orange oil paint to just dry brush on very lightly, and that will give you the rust halo or streaking.
Yeah, the halo is important. If you take a look, even when you're driving down the road, you see that old rust has a tendency to be darker brown, and then around the edges, it continues to bleed out and then streak down from the moisture, and that's what that halo is. So the darker color is acrylic, and the lighter color, the streaking then is the oil. You're just bringing that brush down under vertical motion, right?
Right.
Okay, so we're going to keep moving here. Actually, this couple of these next shots we just did on Wednesday up at the center. This is actually an HO locomotive that I had weathered, and we shot it on Doug Fiscali's display, Finescale models that we have up there, the Peckham Sail Company. And so you see some of the shots here. There's a little bit farther away, that same locomotive stage there. This is actually an SD40-2. This is Scale Trains locomotive, again, that I weathered, but it's displayed on a module that Dave built years ago. This is a craftsman kit on this module, Dave. I can't remember which one it is. I'm sure you do.
It's a fine scale miniatures. Can't remember the exact kit, but yes, fine scale miniatures.
Yeah. And so some other pictures, we're back to, this is in our lobby. We have a display from Finescale. And so this is a GP38 that I weathered, and we shot it in that location there. And then, so we have, actually, if you go back to this one, when we were shooting the HO pictures, we have stuff upstairs that never makes it to the floor just because we're so full in the 7,500 square feet. But this was one that was upstairs. Dave's like, yeah, I got an HO module upstairs. Went up and brought it down, took the Lexan, the plastic cover off. And so that's what happened. We shot it. And so those of you who have been following us for a while know we've been doing updates on the U-boat diorama that Dave is building. This is an overview of it. Dave, this is modeled after something you saw in a European modeling group, right?
Yeah, this is basically done off an Andrea Miniatures, the Spanish company. I used their model as an inspiration. This is a very large model. This is 8 feet long. It's 1/35th, 1/32nd scale. It's a combination of both scales. And this is a long-running project that's been going on for a long time, and it'll continue because I'm to the point where the major structures are done. The ship is built, the U-boat's built, the major buildings in the dry dock is built, but now it's all about details, and it's good. And my update right now, the next pictures will start showing you some of the new details that most people haven't seen. I created some more buildings that go on the end of it, and one of the ones we decorated with some basically would have been a painting or a poster of some type of French port. So everything is done and showing French signage and with some German signage on top. In the foreground is one of the vehicles I worked on. Here's another vehicle. Now the doors are missing only because it's not been staged in its final position, and I'll have figures inside. And if I put the doors on, I have difficulty doing anything with it afterwards. This is a captured French vehicle. I'm not sure if captured is the right word, but when the Germans took France, they started utilizing their stuff. So they incorporated a lot of their stuff into their military. And this is a French vehicle, which will have a load in the back of it that I'm still working on the details for that. This is the only shiny thing I've built in years, which is a German staff car. It's a Mercedes of some type. This one was a very tough project for me to make. Trying to keep stuff shiny is difficult, but I got through it, and it will have some figures. Now, you don't see it here, but all those doors are designed to open, so when I go to install the diorama, when I want to put figures around it to give some sort of storytelling, I'll be able to adjust the doors and do whatever I need to do to it. I added guard shacks. These were laser cut wood. The most difficult part with these was painting those stripes on there. Took a little head scratching to figure out how to do that and make them look right. So
did you mask them? Is that what you did?
I ended up masking them, but I masked them and cut them with the laser at the same time. So it was a bit of a process. But they came out okay, and they depict pretty well what a guard shack would look like. There's two of them, one on either end of the thing. This is once again, detail. It's a generator, a field generator that I brought in, and I'll have electrical wires coming off of it, feeding down into the work area where the U-boat sits. Guys doing work off of it, welders and things of that nature.
Okay. All right, good. So by the way things work at the center, most of the detail work on the models happens at home. Everybody's got their home workshop they're working on, then we bring it in. But when it comes to building the layouts themselves, depending on which layout it is, a lot of that happens in our back shop. And so you can see this is the early stages of the low scale, the Lakeshore Industrial Railway, as we were working on the fundamental, putting the staging in for the backdrop, and you can see we've got track laid and so on. So it's a group project. And here we're working basically on, this is the case of a printed backdrop that we used, and we got this from Backdrop Junction, did a nice job for us. He's reopened his business. And so we're applying it on the back panels. So that's in the back room. So a lot of the construction on the layouts happens there in the back shop. And most of the modeling work on the detailed models happens at home. Now, so where we're headed next, a lot of you said, give us some more detail on how you do this step by step. So if you have any interest at all in weathering anything, certainly any kind of railroad, rolling stock, or could be a military model, could be in any scale. What we're going to show here in this video basically applies to weathering just about anything, to be able to give that sense of what it looks like and makes it real and gets the detail to pop. So I would suggest jot down some notes as you go through this, and then we'll check that the question and answer box as we go forward after this and see what's in there. So here we go.
Welcome to the Sundance Central video on how to weather your rolling stock. You'll learn from this video each of the steps you need to know to weather your rolling stock to look like it's been on the road for years. As you know, there are a number of weathering methods and excellent videos on this topic. You'll see what we did here and how we followed the steps to take an undecorated boxcar to a finished model. These are the ground pigmented powders that are very useful in the weathering process. They're available at hobby shops, at trade shows, and online. The ones we have here are from Bragdon Industries. They often come as a set. Here you can see black, gray, dark brown, rust, and earth color. What you see here are two color stains we put together using brown and then black shoe dye and alcohol. Now we usually mix these 50-50, but if you want a lighter or darker effect, just change the mix. By the way, we recommend you wear vinyl or latex gloves unless you're really interested in weathering your hands. What you see here are acrylic latex paints that can be purchased at any arts and crafts store like Michael's or Joann Fabrics. These are 2-ounce bottles. You should choose a flat sheen color with no gloss. Today we're using pure black, medium yellow, light tan, light gray, medium gray, and barnwood. You'll see later we won't use a big volume of these paints because most of them will be used in a dry brush method. We use the lusterless lacquer you see here as an overspray to seal the decals and the final weathering onto the surface of the car. You can also use Dull Coat. These spray cans are easy and quick if you have a small surface to coat. For our weathering, we like to use Floquel lacquer-based paints in our airbrush. You can also use water-based paints if you wish. The airbrush you see in the upper left-hand portion of the screen is a dual-action internal mix airbrush from Badger. The brushes in the right-hand corner of the screen are the usual assortment of flat and round brushes that we use to apply either full coats of paint or dry brush painting. We started with Bachmann's new 1 to 20.3 30-foot boxcar, undecorated right out of the box. We chose the Bachmann boxcar as a starting point because of the excellent detail on the car. Here you can see the boxcar after we applied our decals with our logo, the car data, and car number to both sides and to the ends of the car. The logo was designed by our team, and the decals were made for us by Stan Cedarleaf. Here you can see the clean end of the boxcar before the decals were applied. And now, the shot of the boxcar end after the decals were applied. To make the decals lay down, we used Solvaset while the decals were still wet. After the decals dried, we went back and cut the decals along the vertical board lines and applied another coat of Solvaset to snug them in. Another advantage of the Bachmann car is that the roof can be removed easily. This is great for weathering, but also for use as a trailing sound or battery car. Here you can see we removed the trucks to allow us to weather the trucks separately from the body of the car. The trucks are easier to weather when they're removed, and you can do a more complete job when you work on them separately. The Bachmann cars came with individual wood slats for the truss rods through the turnbuckles, and we replaced those with a single wood board that we weathered beforehand. We now have the car on its side to remove the couplers. Again, this allows us to weather the coupler as a separate component. For this car, you need to remove the chain on the coupler lift bar. You can see we are now using the light gray acrylic latex paint full strength to simulate a weathered natural wood surface. Now the prototype did not allow roof walks to be painted because they didn't want their workers to slip. So just use slow, even strokes as you apply the paint. You want an even but thin coat so the wood grain detail that the manufacturer has molded in will come through, especially because other weathering colors will be applied on top of this coat later. Here you can see we are touching up the edges of the car so it looks consistent when viewed from the side. Again, there are many details the manufacturers build into these models that just get lost when the car is new and shiny. So take your time and touch up these areas to get a consistently weathered look. The paint is dry, so now we're applying the dried chalks to the painted roof walk boards. The medium brown powders give the board some contrast and texture when applied over the lighter color. The brush we're using here is a stiff bristle variety to help work the chalks into the grain of the roof boards. In this shot, you can see we are testing various colors of weathering chalks and paints applied with a dry brush method. You can begin to see the roof walk with the weathering chalks brushed in for color and for texture. In this shot, you can see some dry brushing of the acrylic latex colors on the body of the roof. We have a bit of an assembly line with the car roofs, and we're lining them up one by one for various applications. First, the gray acrylic latex, and when dry, the weathering chalks are brushed in. The prototype for the Bachmann boxcars had a wood-planked roof rather than a metal roof. So, we need to get some extra texture and some color in the same direction as the wood grain of the boards on the roof. We do this using a dry brushing technique. Now, dry brushing simply means applying the paint to the brush, and then instead of painting the actual surface, you brush most of the paint off the brush and onto a cloth or a newspaper, so the brush is literally dry of nearly all the paint. When you use the dry brush, the texture on the surface you paint will naturally pick up the small amounts of paint left on the brush. We're using a combination of black, gray, barnwood, tan, and white paints. Here you can see the brush is nearly completely dry of paint, but we're going back one more time to bring out the fine edges on the wood grain. This work might seem a little painstaking, but it's really not as slow as you might think. Just remember the time that you invest in some of the more fine weathering techniques will pay off in a big way when the model is viewed close up. We are using the black pigmented powder closer to the center of the roof walk to add another layer of color and to simulate a darker surface under the roof walks. Here is another angle where you can see we are blending in the darker color weathering chalk near the center of the roof. Now that the dry brushing and the weathering chalks have been applied and the edges blended in a bit, we're going over the entire area with dull coat applied with our airbrush. An even but light coat of dull coat works very well to seal our finished weathered roof. Nice wide and even swaths with the airbrush give us a very good coverage and a seal that holds up to normal handling. Remember to have a very good ventilation when you use lacquer-based paints like dull coat. When you paint a larger area like this, there are a lot of fumes in the air. You can see on this video we're actually painting outside. The finished sealed roofs are now drying in the sun. Now, if you've used an airbrush with lacquer-based paints before, you know it doesn't take long for the paint to dry. On a warm day, a light overspray is almost dry on contact, and the model can often be handled a short time later. The airbrush you see here is a single action external model with a bottle for larger quantities of paint. Here we're using engine black with a very light overspray to dull down the sheen on the painted surfaces. We start on the underside of the car. Here's the assembly line in action. One person is cutting the boards for the undercarriage, another is taking couplers off, still others are removing trucks. Everybody has a role. You can see how much easier it is to handle and paint the car with the trucks and the couplers and the roof removed. Now, as the car is pivoted, it allows us to pick up the external details with the overspray, like grab irons, hinges, brake wheels, etc. As you pivot the car to get a good look, keep your eyes peeled for details that are just begging to visually pop from the shiny surface. If you're weathering what would be a metal part, think about how things would naturally rust. If you're using a darker or lighter overspray to streak the car sides or ends, think about how water would run off that car and where it makes logical sense for subtle streaks to appear. Our assembly line is back in action. Here we're using more engine black to pick up details on the side of the car. Now, the engine black not only dulls the painted surfaces, but also provides a darker weathered base to contrast with the other weathering colors. Here, we are applying some light weathering using Flow Quill Roof Brown. Roof brown simulates old rust that has turned dark brown. So in this step, we're using the double action airbrush to provide a weathered, rusted look where metal parts exist on the wood car. Things like door hinges, latches, brake wheel assembly, etc. Here you can see we are lightly streaking some of the boards with engine black to simulate areas where water runoff would naturally discolor and darken the wood. Think about how water would normally run off a boxcar like this, and that's where you're going to be applying the streaks. You can see some additional touch-up here with the engine black and how the water runoff has been simulated, as well as some general areas of discoloration. You can see the car now with some of the black streaking that has been applied. The roof you see in this shot has the roof board weathered, but the body of the roof has not been weathered yet. Notice that weathering streaks happen over and through lettering and heralds, just like in real life. Here you can get a feel for the assembly line in action. Roof boards are being weathered on one table and roof brown is being applied around the metal parts on the car on another table. You can see roof brown weathers everything, by the way, including your thumb, so that's why it's always a good idea to wear gloves. Now, in this picture, it may not appear that much paint is being applied because roof brown and Tuscan are very similar colors, but you'll see in the finished product, it's the subtle color variations that actually make a model pop. Now keep in mind with your airbrush, an internal mix dual action airbrush allows you to regulate not only the amount of air used, but the amount of paint that flows. If you want to create a small thin line or paint very small details with an airbrush, use more air and less paint. And with any airbrush, don't be afraid to get close. This allows you to spray a very thin line. Just for fun, try writing your name in script on a piece of cardboard or newspaper by getting close. You'll be amazed at how accurate you can be. Because the doors on this model actually operate, we wanted to provide some weathering for the inside as well. We are airbrushing some Floquil grime right here, and this light overspray brings out the molded-in detail of the floorboards. Now we are overcoating the grime with a mixture of black shoe polish and alcohol to give the floor an added depth in its look. The darker color over the light base coat allows detail to show through when the top coat is applied sparingly with a dry brush. Now this contrast really allows molded-in detail to come alive when it would have been completely lost in the original factory paint. Now, we're overcoating the grime with a mixture of black shoe polish and alcohol to give that floor an added depth in its look. Here's the assembly line in action. One person is cutting the boards for the undercarriage, another is taking couplers off, still others are removing trucks. Everybody has a role. Wheels and trucks are perhaps the most compelling part of any railroad model. They're loaded with detail that will be missed without proper weathering. Trucks naturally are the part of any railroad car to develop weathered surfaces with multiple colors due to rust, to dust, earth, and general grime. There's a three-step process we used here. 1, roof brown on the wheel surfaces other than the treads. Number 2, the second coat was to apply the original Tuscan red as a light overspray on the outer surfaces of the wheel, and this shows the early stages of rust developing. And number 3, the final coat is with engine black as a fine overspray to tie all those colors together. Notice that we had all the wheels removed from the trucks to make sure we could paint all the surfaces. We finished the process with the wheels by applying a coat of dull coat to seal the work. Here we are applying an overspray of roof brown to the journal boxes and to the springs. Now this is going to act as a base coat for the engine black and the dry brushing to come. Remember, roof brown simulates old rust that is turned darker. This is exactly what you would expect to see in a lot of road-hardened freight cars. So save the rust color paint for the areas that make frequent metal-to-metal contact like coupler faces. In this shot, we're adding a light overspray of engine black to the truck side frames as a means to get ready for the final step, which is dry brushing the trucks. Here you can see the value of removing the trucks before you weather them. When you're holding them in your hand, you can pivot them and weather the parts of the truck that you could never get to if they were still attached to the car. can see what dry brushing does to make the detail pop out on the trucks. The light tan acrylic paint has been dry brushed onto the trucks to pick up edges, rivets, springs, journal boxes, and any other fine detail. You can see in the foreground the paper we used to get most of the paint out of the brush before the application. Now take your time with this step. This is one area where the investment of a little more time with the dry brush will result in a striking appearance. Here you see the finished car. Now remember how clean and shiny it was just a few hours ago? Some strategic airbrushing and dry brushing over the car's details have made it look real. The next 4 shots give a good idea of what the car looks like in its natural habitat. Remember, the idea is to make this look like something other than a plastic model. This Bachmann car has tons of nice detail, but no one will see most of it without a credible weathering job. Here are some shots of a Bachmann Plastic 280. Looks pretty detailed, doesn't it? There's nothing shiny, everything looking like the locomotive has been in road service for some time. Now notice the metal parts. You can see the quote-unquote rust. Some new rust, lots of old rust. I mean, look at the stack. Think about how smoke, how soot, how steam and moisture contact the locomotive and allow that to drive your weathering. A good way to build your weathering expertise is to look at photographs of the real thing. Now, while it may be tough to find many old photos in full color, it's not impossible. And Trains magazine publishes photos of various steam prototypes every month. When you see a picture, or perhaps in person if you're on a fan trip, you can get an image in your head, and you can learn to duplicate that with an airbrush, a dry brush, and some weathering powders. Most of the weathering techniques we showed you in the video were used to create a locomotive that, when photographed at a natural setting like you see here, is hard to tell from the real thing. Just imagine this shay as it comes from the factory, shiny, new looking, and loaded with gorgeous detail that gets lost easily in the gloss black paint. This locomotive looks like it is faded in the sun, and it has a realistic dusty exterior that just screams real. Add some details and figures, and this looks very believable. By the way, even military vehicles weather. I mean, you might notice the windshields on these Jeeps could certainly use some cleaning. Well, fortunately, the windshield wipers have cleared the grime so the driver can see. And by the way, you can do this too on your models. Just cut some cellophane tape in a half moon shape to simulate the coverage of the wipers and stick it on the windshields. Then do an overspray with dull coat, and after you remove the tape, your windshields will look just like this. By the way, creating weathered masterpieces doesn't have to be limited to engines and rolling stock. This photo sequence shows a typical die-cast tow truck that has morphed from shiny and toy-like into one that you could imagine sitting next to in a country gas station. Remember how fenders and doors used to rust through in the old days? Well, a few well-placed holes drilled with a cutter bit and a Dremel tool can make a hole with some rough edges. Simply add some roof brown feathered in around those edges, and you have a realistic rust-through. Here is a classic example of a plastic model that has been transformed from toy to serious model. As these pictures sequence, notice how the canvas shade adds realism, how the streaks on the boiler simulate water runoff, and how the parts that would be metal in real life look like metal because they've been weathered. The next 5 pictures show a Bachmann shade that was modified to a 3-truck version. Now, beyond the modification, notice how the addition of tools, a green hose made from solder, by the way, some cans and pilot details like common jewelry chains that have been rusted really make this plastic model come alive. You know, weathering should be fun and a creative outlet, so use your imagination and don't be afraid to experiment. The best news is, if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. Mineral spirits will remove most of those mistakes without taking off the original paint and numbering. So have some fun. We hope you have enjoyed this video and picked up some ideas and tips as you weather your own cars. Nothing makes a train look more real than a credible weathering job. And if you follow the simple steps we've outlined here, you too can have rolling stock and locomotives that will be the envy of your friends. The Sundance Central modular layout is a dynamic project that will likely never stop evolving. Hopefully this video has provided you with some insight and useful hints on how to construct a modular layout in large scale. To learn more about the Sundance Central, go to www.sundancecentral.org.
Okay, so there you go. Some detail that people ask for on how we weather these things. And, you know, obviously there's some updates since we have done this. Many of you use pan pastels, which we do too. And I'm sure some of you were wondering, well, yeah, we'd love to use flow quill in our airbrushes too, but it's no longer available. I'm going to ask our panelists here at the center to turn their audio back on. There are other companies out there that are making sprayable weathering colors you can use. Certainly Model Masters is one. I don't know, Dave, Frank, Richard, you guys have other recommendations about the best colors to use if you can't get your hands on flow quill?
Lately, I've been using True Color and also Vallejo. Vallejo makes an enormous selection of colors. So I would go with them. And I've been building a submarine lately, and I've been using some True Color on there. And that's coming out pretty nice too.
Okay, good. Some other people have asked, by the way, where this video is going to be available. If you look at the URL that's up there, that's a private link that Keith provided to me. But I'm going to be posting this on our YouTube channel, which if you just go to YouTube and you type in the Suncoast Center for Finescale Modeling. You'll come to our YouTube channel. Should have it up there by this evening at the latest. If you want to revisit the video, it'll be there. And there's some other questions about alcohol versus India ink versus shoe polish. I think we answered that question in the box as well. And whether or not we wash or clean these models before we weather them. What's the answer to that, guys? Those of you that are panelists, are we washing and cleaning these models? I have my paradigm about that, but perhaps you guys want to jump in.
I don't worry about it too much because I'm going to mess it up anyways.
That's sort of my paradigm too. As long as
I don't think I've ever washed a model or figure before I started painting, because a lot of times most of the time I use enamel paints anyway, which require, lacquer thinner or something like that to thin them down. And that just seems to eat right through any grease and grime or fingerprints that you have on the model to start with.
Right. Yep. Yeah, it might be a different story if you're going to actually change the base coat. You're going to do a fine, finish coat on a brass model or something where you're not going to weather it. That might be one thing. I'd probably clean that in advance. But for weathering, typically not. Don't have to do that. Okay, so we have, and by the way, Keith, thank you for producing the video back when you did. It's been very helpful. Again, this will be posted on our YouTube channel. We do have one more segment here. It's shorter, but it's on the backdrop painting that John Addison is doing. And so we have another short video we just shot the other day, actually, about 2 weeks ago, I guess. I caught John when he was actually doing some of his painting. And so this video is about 7 or 8 minutes long. You'll hear John describe what he's doing. And then afterwards, we're going to bring John up live so he can give us some additional narration and answer your questions. So this is on painting backdrops.
So what are you painting there? Is it going to be like the base for the terrain that you start with a black? Is that what you
Yeah, you start with a black for the shadow and stuff like that. You create a black. And then you come back with your other colors when this is dry. And then if you want to come back and add rocks and stuff like that in here to break it up, which I'm going to do, I'm not going to leave it like this right here. I mean, there'll be quite a few layers on this before it's all done.
Yeah, how long is it going to take for that to dry before you can go back and do something else on it?
Not that long.
And this is just acrylic craft paint, right?
Yeah, this is just this stuff right here. It's just cheap apple barrel.
Yeah.
I tried the Dollar Tree special paint, but that stuff doesn't
cheap?
work. Yeah, you go and put it on there and and then if it gets wet at all, whatever you put on the top of it just washes right off. The whole thing just washes off.
The color, the base color washes?
The base color takes everything else out of the top off.
Yeah, not enough pigment or something?
Yeah, something. I don't know what it is about it, but something's not right about it.
Yeah, but I mean, that bottle you have there probably costs, what, $3?
Right.
And it's a big bottle.
Right. But black is what you put down because that gives you your shadow color. That's how you get all the shadows and stuff. Even in this stuff here. You get
So you started with black on these other parts here?
Yeah. The mountains and everything have black underneath.
Trees,
first.
all that stuff?
Yeah, the trees are just a combination of black and green.
Well, I was thinking about that tree line in the back there.
Oh yeah, it's got black in there too.
Yeah, all right. So that's how you get your,
right.
These are your future shadows.
Right, that's what they are. Yeah. And it's if you're gonna do if you're gonna do a rock, if you want to do a rock, then you just come here and the kind of rocks I'm doing anyway right now.
What is that? Is that raw sienna?
No, it looks like raw sienna. It's very close. It's called nutmeg. I call it poor man's raw sienna.
That's right. If it's true raw sienna, the price is twice as much.
Right, exactly.
What are you mixing with, a little white?
Yeah, mixing with a little white.
Yeah, so the key is you got to make all these custom colors, huh?
Yeah, you can come in there and make a rock like so.
Even though the paint wasn't dry.
Yeah, you can make one like that right there. You come back on the top here.
So you were counting on a little bit of wet paint to get some of that?
Sometimes I do. Sometimes it's too late and you can't do anything. And then you try to shadow the other side of it like that.
Yeah, that's all right.
It's just a quick. Sometimes it's better to let it dry. Sometimes it's not. It just depends on what you're trying to do here. But you can get all kinds of effects by.
So these foreground rocks are making a little more brownish as opposed to gray, or are we gonna mix?
Yeah, well, this is kind of the color of the rocks on my scenery, so it's kind of like it's gotta have to match somewhat. It's gonna have to match somewhat to be, you know. But you have to put some rocks in here, otherwise it'll be too much. It'll overpower the scene with too much.
Too much terrain.
Yeah, just not enough. Well, not enough terrain sticking out. It'll be all, you know, all one thing, and I don't really want to do that. I really want to have.
So these rocks that we're looking at behind the trees, right next to the water, they started out the same way, and you put some of those lighter highlights on them.
No, it was dry when I put them on, and they have a little bit of yellow in them.
Yeah.
Okay, I may come back and add a little yellow to these.
There's a little bit of sunlight reflecting off the top of the rocks.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'll probably do some other things to these eventually before I'm satisfied with them. But you can see the black is already starting to dry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And stuff like that. And that's how you get the basic.
So that could sit for half an hour, and you'd be able to put another color on top of it without too much blending. All right, so you are, so you're blending. So in that case, you decided to go ahead and put the rocks on while the paint's still wet.
Right, right. And if I want to change it when they're dry, I can come back and change it with highlighted, dry brush some colors in there. You can even use a pencil. You can use a regular, pencil to go in and highlight the rocks and stuff like that. You can do all kinds of.
It's like a number 2 pencil, soft lead.
Yep.
Really?
So you go in there and do all kinds of shadowing and stuff like that. Or you can buy shadow art pencils and do stuff, make them more detailed, the rocks more detailed and stuff. So it's a lot easier than trying to go in there with a little brush and trying to paint that in, because that's when it gets really, really aggravating.
Now, speaking of brushes, I'm surprised that your brushes look pretty big for all of this, huh?
Well, I got a whole bunch of small ones here too.
So when you go back and do more detail,
yeah, they do the pine trees and the detailing. Yeah, so I got a bunch of just small ones here.
Like that trunk line down the middle of the pine trees, is he's doing that with a small brush?
Yeah, that's done with a fan brush. Yeah.
All right.
One of these guys right here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's what that's done with. So I got a whole bunch of small.
Yeah, so the fan brush allows you to come up with not a complete line, but just looks like a broken line with got some of the branches showing through, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, trunk. It also works great for aspens, because aspens have that bark already that's peeling and stuff, and you can just hit them with a fan brush and dab it, and it works really good.
Yeah, I know you painted about 10 miles of that stuff on John Brennan's layout. So it must be relatively time efficient, right? Yeah. Maybe like Leonardo da Vinci, spending...
John Brennan's. I learned a lot from painting his. I wish I could go back and redo his, because I'm a lot better now than I was when I did it.
It looks good, though. I mean, it's a long backdrop.
He's happy with it.
Oh, yeah.
I go back and say, I could fix that and make this better and that and that.
Uh-huh.
But it's also harder now because all the scenery's been done in front of it. It's like when I did that one over there, the scenery's all done, so it's a lot harder to...
Right.
It's a lot harder to do it now, so, But I still like to go back and do
Don't we all? Yes.
You know how it is in modeling. You say, I go back, I could fix that building and make it better than it was when I did it.
Yeah, before I started taping this, you said a minute ago, one thing you learned is don't be afraid to cover up something you've already done.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially true in this stuff. You definitely want to have it where you can go back and change it and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm sure when we look at artists that do like portraits or scenes or whatever for framing, there's a lot of changes are made when they're using watercolors, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
They do.
Interesting.
Like I said, Bob Ross was notorious at covering stuff up he did.
How long do you think it's going to take you to complete this piece?
I probably got about 16 to 20 hours left on this one.
Uh-huh. How many hours in it so far?
About 6 probably.
All right. So it's basically somewhere between 24 and 30 hours.
Yeah.
Total.
This one, yeah.
Yep. You could pull an all-nighter and do it like in one period of time.
I thought about coming up and doing that very thing. There's a couch right over there.
Uh-huh. There you go. Yeah.
So I really thought about doing that. I thought about coming up here on a Sunday and just spending all day here doing it.
Well, I mean, there's such a thing as like getting in the groove, where you, as opposed to starting and stopping.
Right. because I have to stop now and go back to work, and then this afternoon late, go back to work, and I can't stay here. I'd like to stay here until 7 tonight or something.
Right.
So, but I can't do it.
All right.
So,
Well, it's looking great, John.
all right, thank you. Hope it turns out that way. We'll see.
Okay, there you go. John, are you on live with us? Can we have your audio?
I'm here.
Okay, so we got some comments. One of the questions was, well, why would you paint a backdrop instead of using a photo backdrop? It's a legitimate question. There's some really beautiful photo backdrops out there. We use several in the center, but why do you paint yours instead of using a photo backdrop?
Well, sometimes when you're in the middle of painting your backdrop, you kind of wonder why you didn't see the already
Oh,
painted.
you've got the same question, huh?
But the real answer is that I basically want to put my own signature on my layout. And this is my way of doing it. It's my signature on the backdrop as opposed to, using somebody else's. So, don't get me wrong, I've seen some fantastic stuff done with printed backdrops. We have plenty of examples here in the center of that. But for me, I just wanted to do my own personal flair on it, so to speak.
Yeah, another thing I thought of is it might be cost. For example, I mentioned John Brennan's layout when we shot that video. He's got what, maybe 150 feet of backdrop? And so
A lot, yes.
if you got into a photo backdrop, it would be expensive. I don't know, Dave, how much did it cost us for the photo backdrop for the Sundance Central? Was that $5 or $6 grand, if I recall?
Between $5,000 and $6,000.
Yeah, so, that might be one issue. Now, I'm sure another thing people are wondering, John, obviously you have artistic ability as we watch you do this and then produce these kinds of outcomes. What is your advice? I mean, how artistic do you have to be to even try this?
Well, my advice is to practice, to buy some foam core board and start watching. They're all free on YouTube. You can watch Bob Ross videos, and that will give you an idea. Even though he's using oil paints, a lot of his techniques work with acrylics. Of course, the problem with acrylics is they dry so fast, but a lot of the techniques you can use, you just have to put extender in your acrylic paint, or you have to get to it before it dries to do the next phase on top of it. Like with reflections, water reflections, that's especially true. Because almost by the time you pull down the tree line on the water reflections, like on this lake here, it's almost dry so fast. So you've almost got to go back with a dry brush and do the little fade the water reflections and dry brush across them so that they extend out and it gives that flare to them that look like they're a reflection on the water.
Yep. Yeah, so this is beautiful work, John. I see basically you started with black almost everywhere, right? As we saw on the video. Those
Black.
mountains started as black.
Black under them.
Reynolds started as black.
Right. Yep.
And then you're adding your colors on top. I presume you went and did the snow last?
Yeah, the snow was done last. The snow was the last thing I've done, and I've been playing with it here and there, adding shadows to it and adding, tiny little evidence that there's rocks sticking up through it because it's a lot of it's kind of melted already. So I'm kind of doing that as I'm going along and seeing if I want to put any more or take any away or whatever. You can kind of go back and do all that, which is nice to do when you're painting your own backdrop.
How many times have you revised some of these scenes, John?
Well, there'll be more revisions coming as I look at it, because I'm still practicing painting backdrops at my house too. So that kind of thing kind of gives me some ideas to go back and do things. And the biggest challenge is going to be when this one is done is putting it back up and then blending it together with the module that's right next to it. That's going to be the huge challenge here, is blending the two together. And plus, before I put it back up, I've got to get rid of that background mountain and behind there so it doesn't detract from the foreground mountain. So I'm going to try to fade sky back into that, which is going to be difficult to do, but it's going to be worth the effort when it's done.
All right, so for those of you thinking about any kind of painting like this or painting backdrop, your advice is practice, start on something. I mean, the acrylic paints are cheap, poster board is cheap. You know, look at some pictures, watch a few videos and see how it goes. It may not be for everybody, but you know, some people might actually like it as they start doing it. Yes.
You can learn, yeah, you can learn a lot by watching those videos. And like I said, you just keep practice on pieces of foam core board, small pieces that are like 12 by, 8 inches or something like that, maybe a little bigger than that. And you basically just keep practicing, and you'll start to figure out things, and then you'll be able to see whether you can really do this or not. A lot of people don't think they can do it, but they may be able to do it if they just start practicing to see what kind of ability they really have.
Yeah, or there might be something even less aggressive than a whole backdrop. Maybe there's just some scene in your layout where you need something as a backdrop or a smaller space, and you can experiment with maybe some trees or some rocks or whatever. Yes.
Exactly. Yes. You don't have to be doing a big mountain and a lake. You can do just a simple thing, just a simple fadeaway mountains or stuff like that.
One thing I've seen online, full of photographs and a couple of videos, is people where you have a road that goes into a flat backdrop, and they want to be able to simulate that the road goes off in the distance, that they have hand painted the road to make it look like it continues on. And that's been pretty effective.
Yeah, I have to do that on this backdrop, actually. In a part I haven't gotten to yet, there's actually a road that goes off into the distance that I have to add that into this at some point.
Yeah, but you get the right angles and the right colors. It's pretty impressive. Makes for a nice detail.
Yes, a little forced perspective thing going on there.
Okay, well, thank you, John. Beautiful work on this. By the way, this video that you just watched is already posted on our YouTube channel. So you can go and watch it there again if you want. And if you have any questions, just email us through our website. I'm sure John can give you some other suggestions on other videos that you might want to watch. By the way, speaking of the YouTube channel, there's a lot up there. You just go to YouTube and put in Suncoast Center for Finescale Modeling. We post all of these virtual open houses. The recording of this one will be posted by tomorrow night. So you can go watch it again or share it with your friends. We generally get about 4 or 5 times as many views through the YouTube channel as we have people live on the virtual webinar, but it's there. So lots of stuff. We're adding more things to the channel. And we have some subscriptions to some of the other people that we know are doing good work. You can check there too and see some of our recommendations on other YouTube channels for you to look at. And then, of course, our website, finescalemodeling.org. And here there's a bunch of stuff you'll find. You can join our mailing list if you're not on it already. I know many of you are, but if you're not, sign up for it. And we'll keep you posted on things we're doing so you'll know. When we reopen, you're going to want to come to the place. And the directions are there. Our events are all listed there. And we have an online gift shop with some of the photographs and cups and, frame things and postcards. If you have interest in any of that, that's also there for the online gift shop. So again, we appreciate you joining us, and nearly everybody stayed to the very end, even though we went 1 hour and 16 minutes today. So hopefully you learned something, and I think we answered all the questions that you had. So go on about your modeling and have a great time. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll keep you posted. We'll do another one of these in August. All right, take care, everybody. Thank you.